Hi class, in this video we're going to look at an example from chapter 28. So this problem is pretty long. Some of the other problems in the homework are a lot shorter, but they are based on some of the same processes that we'll go through with this problem. So I thought, well, let's just do the long one, and you can apply these concepts to some of the other problems. So this one says LEB Games Incorporated has two producing departments. One is fabricating and one is assembly. And we've got some data for June. And then also it says there's no beginning inventories. So it looks like we've got some costs, some amounts, some stages of production, and then it has a million requirements down here that we've got to do. So the first one says, in general ledger form, record the flow of costs that follow. And we're supposed to date those entries on June the 30th. So it looks like we've got 3 journal entries. And the first one says, record the issuance of materials to each department. In other words, we're taking raw materials out of the warehouse. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. And we're putting them into production. And they are going to be either in the assembly department or the fabricating department. And to know how much it is, we've got to come up here. All right, so in the top it says we transferred $60,000 of materials into fabricating and $10,000 into the assembly. That was our material cost. So that's the amount we're going to put down here. So fabricating was $60,000, assembly was $10,000, which means we took $70,000 out of the warehouse. So that's all there is to entry 1. Entry 2 says record the labor cost, and we're going to do that by department. Excuse me. So here's our labor cost for, let's see, the fabricating is $46,980. Assembly is $16,320. So let's start this entry. And when we do direct labor, that goes directly into work in process. And in this case, since we have 2 departments, we're going to split it up between work in process fabricating and work in process assembly. And those amounts were given. All right, so this is our gross pay. Now this is almost like a payroll entry because we're going to have our gross pay, and then we're going to take out of our gross pay all of our deductions. And eventually we're going to get down to the net pay, which then it goes to the employee. So we need to know what deductions we took out. So that the gross pay is up here in the chart. We have got to know the withholdings, and that's in letter B of requirement 1. So we've got Social Security, Medicare, federal income tax, and it gives us the amount. So we're going to pull each of those amounts down. So Social Security. And mine was for $3,925. My Medicare was for $918. And these are all payables because we've got to pay this stuff into the government. My income tax was $94.95. And there was only those 3. So now we have our gross pay. This is the stuff we kept out. So we're left with the net pay, and the net pay is what we're going to pay to our employees. So that's salaries and wages payable. It's still a debt because we haven't paid them yet, so it's a payable. So you're going to take your debits, subtract out your credits, and that's going to give you the amount for this one, and that comes out to $48,962. And let me make sure I did my math right on that. Oh, I bet I got them backwards. Well, if you have this problem, try flip-flopping them. As I know those amounts are right, they're given in the instructions. I did not calculate those, so let's flip them. Let's put the fabricating department first, and the assembly department second. fabricating was 46,980. I think I do actually have them had them flip before. Let's try that again, see if it works. Yep. Alright, so just don't do like me. Make sure you can read and transfer stuff correctly. Alright, I think we've got one more entry. It says record the distribution of manufacturing overhead to each department. So we're going to take some amount out of manufacturing overhead because we're applying it. And we're going to put it into whichever department's work in process we're talking about. So we have a work in process fabricating and a work in process assembly. And that's how we apply our overhead. We're going to do those accounts. So let's see. It looks like we're going to have to get that off this chart. Well, yep, it's already calculated for us. How nice. So manufacturing overhead, fabricating is 24,940. Assembly is 11,040. If we add those up, we actually are applying $35,980 in overhead. All right, let's check one more time, make sure I've got my journal entries correct. So yours should look like this. Your amounts probably be a little different, but that's what basically it should look like. And that's requirement 1. So let's see, requirement 2 says prepare the equivalent production computations for each department. So we're going to click on requirement 2, and we have this lovely chart here. But thankfully they've got all the labels in it, so maybe it won't be too bad. All right, so we've got 2 departments. Here's our fabricating, here's our assembly. It looks like whatever this is we're making, and I already forgot. Games, was it games? Yeah. It's like they fabricate the games, so the flow is they fabricate and then stuff goes to the assembly department, it would appear to me. So we're going to look at the units that we've transferred. So units transferred out to the next department. So we're looking at up here. Fabricating and assembly. So transferred out to the next department, we had 5,000 transferred out from the fabricating to the assembly. And then work in process. And this is for materials. So that's our work in process inventory. That's 1,000 units that they say that we have in process at the end of the period. So that goes here. So for our equivalent units for materials, we have 6,000 units in the fabricating department. 5,000 we sent on, 1,000 we've got in process. For labor and overhead, all right, units transferred out to next department. For our, let's see, let's go back here. I have to think through this. Our units transferred out to the next department, as far as labor is concerned, they're finished, because if they weren't, you would still have them there. You can't add labor to something that you've transferred out. So the units transferred out to the next department in terms of labor are 100% complete. So all 5,000 of those units were finished with as far as labor within the fabricating department. So they all get transferred out. Our units that are in process, as far as labor, I think it said they were 80% complete. Yeah. So our work in process are only 80% complete in terms of labor. In other words, we're going to have to apply another 20% hours worth of labor to the stuff that's in process before it's done. So our work in process where was it? Our ending work in process was 1,000 units. And those 1,000 units are only 80% complete in terms of labor. So if we take 80% of 1,000 units, the equivalent of that is 800 units. Let's see where it's going, right there. In other words, I guess the best way to think about that, we worked on 1,000 units. We didn't quite get done. If we had used those same number of labor hours and done fewer units, we could have finished 800 of them with the same number of hours if we had tried to do less. So that's just the equivalent number that we finished in terms of labor. So then that gives equivalent units of production for labor and overhead. Because it looks like they've kind of lumped manufacturing labor and overhead in there together. So we've got 5,800 units. And the assembly department, we're going to do the same thing. Materials or units transferred out to finished goods was up here on the chart, right here, 4,600 units. And you'll notice up here in this part, these transfers went to the next department. These go to finished goods, and that's because the assembly department is the last department before the stuff is finished. So it gets fabricated, then it goes to assembly, and then it's done. So these go out to finished goods, and then we've got work in process for materials. And it says that these items are 100% complete for materials. Oh, right here. Work in process, I'm sorry. So work in process, we haven't gotten to the 100% part yet. Work in process ending inventory was 400 units, and they just gave us that. So we're going to put that in here. And that's for materials. Now we can go to those percents. So labor, manufacturing, overhead, units transferred out to the other, or to finished goods. Well, if you transferred them out, they're done. They're 100% complete. So here's the 4,600 units that we transferred out. They're complete in terms of materials, labor, and overhead. So we're going to put that 4,600 in here. Whoops, I put it in the wrong box. And then for your work in process, we had 400 items that are in process, and they are 50% complete in terms of labor and overhead. So 400 items, 50% complete. The equivalent is 200, it's just half of that. So our equivalent units of production for labor and overhead for the assembly department is 4,800. So let's check and make sure I've got that right. And that looks good. Requirement 3A, went too far. Prepare a cost of production report for each department. So 3A is the fabricating, 3B is the assembly. All right, so we have another one of these lovely charts, and thankfully they have all these labels on it, so that will help us. All right, so our quantity started in production. Whoops, I gotta go back to my worksheet. And we are in the fabricating department. So we're in the quantity to be accounted for. I believe this thing said there was no beginning inventory. So everything we're dealing with is what we started during the month. So the total number of units that we need to account for are the 6,000 units that we had. We had 5,000 that we finished, 6,000, and another 1,000 that were in process. So that's the ones to be accounted for. And the ones that we accounted for were 5,000 that we transferred out and 1,000 that we have on work in process. All right, now we start breaking these out into total cost, units of production, or equivalent production units, and unit costs. And these are all dollar, well, these are dollar amounts, these are units. All right, so I'm going to start here actually. Cost incurred in the current department. If we look at the units in the chart that we had before, for materials, we had 6,000 equivalent units. For labor, and they actually on this chart lumped in labor and overhead together, for each of those we have 5,800 units. So take those amounts, oops, and plug them in over here. There's the 6,000, there's the 5,800 units for labor, 5,800 units for overhead. I just think that's an easy place to start. Our total costs are up here in our chart. So we're doing the fabricating department right now. So we had 60,000 in material, 46,980 in labor, 24,940 in overhead. So those we're just going to pull down. All right, so there's our cost, and there's our equivalent units. So the unit cost is just the total cost divided by the number of units. So for materials, costs us $10 for each thing, for each unit to make in terms of materials. If you take the unit here, or the cost, and divide it by the units here, you should get $8.10 of labor for each one. Whoops, it's the wrong box again. Fix that. And for overhead, you're going to do the same thing, divide the cost by the units, and it comes up to $4.30. So it cost us $22.40 for materials, labors, and overhead to make those games or whatever it is we're making. So then we've got this next section down here that says cost accounted for. And we've got a category that says transferred out to next department. So again, I'm going to look over here. Our units transferred out to the other department were 5,000 units. So I just like to start in the middle. It's just the way I do it, because it makes sense to me that way, but you can think of another way to do it. You can do that. When we transfer out units, we're going to do it by the unit cost. So we've got 5,000 units. Each of those units cost $22.40. Oops. And we know that because we just calculated it in this section above. So put your units in, put your total cost in. Then you can figure out what cost total were transferred by taking the 5,000 units and multiplying it by $22.40 per unit. Gives you $112,000 that you transferred out in cost. All right, and then your work in process. Again, I like to start in the middle with the units. Those units, you have to go back over to the previous tab. We're still in the fabricating, so we've got, oops, our work in process units were 800 units for labor and overhead, and there's the 1,000 units for materials. So here's our 1,000 units for materials, 800 for labor, and 800 for overhead. And that just came off the chart from before. The costs, we're still in that unit cost item. Those come up from what we just previously calculated. So take these amounts and just pull them down. So we've got $10 in materials, $8.10 in labor, and $4.30 in overhead. And then you're just going to multiply across to get those costs, just like we did up here. So 1,000 units times $10 a unit gives you 10,000 in materials. Do the same thing with your labor, and you get $6,480 in labor. Same thing for overhead, 800 times $4.30, $3,440. All right, total cost accounted for. Did they give us that somewhere? Yeah. Up here, total cost $131,920. Here's our total cost accounted for, $131,920. So we've actually accounted for all of our costs. Sometimes there's a rounding error. So if there is, you could, like if it's a penny off, you can put a penny in there. Well, that one didn't even do it, but if it had a rounding error, you put it in there and come out with your total cost, so it matches what your actual total costs were. All right, so that's 3A. 3B is the same thing. It's just a chart for the assembly department. So we're gonna get a lot of this stuff from the requirement 2 tab, and then some from the top. All right, so transferred in from prior department, I believe that was 5,000 units. Yes, they came out of the fabricating department, went into the assembly. So they were transferred in. And then the total units that we had to account for, if we go back over here, we had some that were transferred out, and then we had some that were in process. So 46,000 or 4,600 were transferred out, 400 were still in process. All right, and then we're down to this lovely second part of the chart. So we have our cost, our units, and our unit cost. So I always put the units in first, and I get those from the previous charts. So this one actually says cost in prior department. Look at this one before. There is no cost in prior department because there's not a prior department. But since the assembly department has a prior department, we have to account for the cost that we inherited. So those costs are right here. That's that $112,000 that we calculated that we transferred out to next department. So we're going to take this whole line and just move it over. So that was $112,000 that we got transferred in, and that was for 5,000 units, which was $22.40 a unit. So that's the cost we had off the get-go. That's what we inherited. Now we're going to do the materials, labor, and overhead. So we go back to the previous chart, look at your fabricating part. Here's your materials, your labor, and overhead that you're accounting for, 1,000, 800, and 800. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm going down too far. 6,000, 5,100, I'm sorry. Let me make sure I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm on the wrong chart. No wonder that doesn't make sense. Oh, here we go. All right. We had 5,000 units in materials, and here's the 4,800 in labor and overhead. That makes more sense. So you have to actually skip over two tabs to get that. All right, so there's our units. That came off of requirement 2, right? Yeah. All right, we're going to put in our amounts, and that's from up here in the chart. So the dollar amounts that we've spent, 10,000, 16,000 some odd, 11,000 some odd. I'm going to take those amounts for material, labor, and overhead and bring them straight down and put them in these boxes. So we've got 10,000 in materials, 16,320 in labor, and manufacturing overhead, $11,040. So those came off the chart. So you know, if you pay 10,000 total for materials and that made 5,000 units, then each unit cost you $2. So you're just dividing the amount by the number and getting a unit price. So this one was $3.40. Then $11,040 divided by 4,800 is $2.30. And that gives you a unit cost of $30.10. But that $30.10 is actually made up of the $22.40 that came from the previous department plus the $7.70 that you spent here. So total cost so far $30.10. And then transferred out the finished goods is the $30.10 per unit. And I forgot how many, let's see. Transferred out to finished goods, 4,600 units. So to figure out the dollar amount for that, you can take the units, the 4,600 times $30.10 each, gives you $138,460. All right, and then our work in process we've got to deal with. So let's go back over to that requirement 2 and down to the assembly. For materials work in process, we had 400 units, and then labor and overhead, we had 200 units. And also, we had some that were transferred in. So they're going to be transferred at that $22.40. All right, so all the way down here, cost in prior departments. We already said that prior department was $22.40. That was calculated on the previous slide. And we have, at this point, our work in process of 400 units. So 400 units. So if we multiply 400 units times $22.40, that's $8,960. And then down here is our amounts that we had from the requirement 2. We had 200 in process for 400 in process for materials, 200 each for labor and overhead. And then the dollar amounts are what we just calculated. So $2 for material, $3.40 for labor, $2.30 for overhead. Then you're going to multiply this across to get the total dollar amount. So 400 units times $2 a unit is $800. 200 units times $3.40 is $680. And 200 units times $2.30 is $460. And this was just like the other one. We're going to have, they have that little rounding adjustment area. I don't know if we need it. Let's see. Our total costs were $37,360. Plus the what have we transferred in? Let's see. $37,360. Plus the $112,000 that we transferred in, which is right here. We also had it somewhere, I guess we didn't, it was just 112 we transferred in. So we got the 112 we transferred in, plus what we spent in this department, which was the $37,360, which is $149,360, and that's what we got. So you don't need that rounding adjustment, so you can put a 0 in there if you want. Oh goodness, let's check that and see if it's right. That's a long one. All right, so yours should look something like that. Requirement 4, I hope, is shorter. Looks like we got some journal entries. Yes. Record the transfer of goods from the fabricating department to the assembly department. So we're just taking work in process out of fabricating and sending it to assembly. And that was $112,000. And if you remember, So yes, I want to save the sheet. There's the 100. Our cost in prior department, that when we did 3B, that was $112,000 that we calculated that we sent in. So here's the entry number 1. Record the transfer of completed goods from the assembly to the finished goods storeroom. So let's see. In the chart, in the assembly chart, this is our cost production report assembly department. It says transferred out to finished goods, and we had a cost, and that was $138,460. So get way back over here. That's coming out of finished, or I'm sorry, that's coming out of work in process. It was in the assembly department. Now it goes into finished goods. And that was $138,460. Record sales on credit of $152,100. That's pretty easy. Accounts receivable and sales. And they told us how much it was. And then it says record cost of goods sold. So to do that, we're going to get rid of our inventory because we don't have it anymore, and it becomes cost of goods sold. Did it tell us? Yes. Up here it says these goods cost $106,500 to manufacture. So you didn't have to calculate that. They gave it to us. So that's 4 journal entries. Yours looks something like this. And we've got an analyze. What was the balance of the work in process account for the fabricating department on June the 30th? So I am in requirement 3A. This is our cost of production report for fabricating department because that's the one it asked about. So if you scroll down towards the bottom, it has the cost that we accounted for. And we accounted for all, well, these costs were finished and transferred out, but all these costs are in our work in process. So here's our total work in process of $19,920. That's what they're asking us for. Oops, why isn't it going? Help if I return to question. Try that again, $19,920. And we'll check and make sure we don't have any weird things going on. Answer is complete and correct. Woohoo! So that's how you're going to do that one. Some of the other problems are similar, like I said, but I think at least having this whole process, you should be able to pick out pieces to do the other ones. But as always, if you have questions or comments, please let me know, and I will try to help.